What is the meaning of suffering? It is one of the most inescapable parts of life. No one is immune to it, and yet, the real question isn't why we suffer, but what suffering actually means. Nietzsche put it the best. Man, the bravest animal and the most prone to suffering, does not deny suffering as such. He wields it. He even seeks it out, provided he's shown a meaning for it. Suffering in itself isn't the problem. It is suffering without meaning that becomes unbearable. We can endure almost anything if we believe that it has a purpose. But when suffering feels meaningless, it crushes us. What is suffering really? Suffering comes in many forms. There is physical pain, hunger, exhaustion. Then there is the psychological suffering, grief, anxiety, loneliness, failure, and in a way, the longer you live, the more you experience. Some have tried to eliminate suffering entirely. Dostoevsky warns us against this. Shower upon man every earthly blessing. Give him nothing to do but sleep, eat cakes, and reproduce. And even out of sheer ingratitude, sheer spite, man would play you some nasty trick. Trying to erase suffering leads to something worse. Emptiness, nihilism, a sense that nothing really matters. Which brings us to this very important question, that is suffering really necessary? Carl Jung believed that every society has its own myth of a lost paradise, a time when everything was perfect. But the truth, he says, is far more brutal. Man's real life consists of a complex of inexorable opposites: day and night, birth and death, happiness and misery, good and evil. Life is a battleground. It has always been, and it always will be. Nietzsche takes this even further. He argues that suffering and joy are inseparable. If you want to experience the highest peaks of happiness, you must be willing to endure the lowest depths of pain. But what if pleasure and pain should be so closely connected that he who wants the greatest possible amount of one must also have the greatest possible amount of the other? But what if pleasure and pain? In other words, if you chase comfort at all costs, you may never truly experience happiness. Those who run away from pain may never get to know the full depth of joy. But what do you do when you are consistently suffering? Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, saw suffering firsthand. He realized something profound. He says, in some way, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Frankl believed that we find meaning in three ways: through work, which means creating something of value; through love, connecting deeply with another human being; and through our attitude towards suffering, choosing to face it with courage. Nietzsche echoes this idea. He says, "He who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how." This is the difference between suffering that destroys us and suffering that transforms us. The dangerous solution: asceticism. For centuries, people have tried to give suffering meaning through religion, morality, and self-denial. Nietzsche called this the ascetic ideal, the belief that suffering is good because it purifies us. One no longer protested against pain. One thirsted for pain. Religion, like Christianity, has preached that suffering is the price of sin or ignorance. that we must deny our desires, suppress our instincts, and live a life of full discipline. But Nietzsche saw this as a trick, one that numbed people to life instead of embracing it. Instead of avoiding suffering or twisting it into a punishment, Nietzsche believed we should embrace it as a part of what makes us great. He writes, "Do you not know that only this discipline has created all enhancements of man so far? Pain isn't something to run from, it is something to grow from." Now that we're reaching the end of this video, I want you to look at pain in a new way. So what if instead of avoiding suffering, we accepted it? What if we saw this as not an enemy, but as a teacher? We don't have to seek out suffering for its own sake, but when it comes, as it inevitably does, we can choose to find meaning in it. This does not mean suffering is good. It does not have the power to decide what your suffering truly means, because in the end, suffering always will exist. The real question is, what will you do with it? Thank you for watching this video. This is one of the first in a series of philosophical perspectives of life that I'll be making in this channel. If videos of that nature interest you, please do not forget to follow and click on the subscribe button. Thank you.